The United Methodist Church has over 12.7 million members in over 32,000 churches, and just over half of those members are in the United States. It's the largest mainline Protestant denomination in the U.S. and the third largest Christian body in the U.S., behind the Southern Baptist Convention and the Catholic Church. Although there are plenty of other Methodist denominations in the United States, a wide variety have stayed together in the United Methodist Church until now, with theological liberals and conservatives together. Some of the things that split other denominations over time, like women in ministry, weren't an issue in the Methodist tradition, which has always allowed women to be preachers. However, the thing that's been splitting denominations in the last 2 decades, the question of acceptance of LGBT identity and ministry in the church, looks to be what will finally break up the United Methodist Church too. How this went in the other denominations is typically that a mainline denomination allowed practicing homosexuals or transgender persons to be ministers or affirmed same-sex marriage, and as a result, a non-affirming denomination broke off. The North American Lutheran Church broke from the ELCA like this in 2010. ECO, a covenant order of evangelical Presbyterians, broke from the PCUSA in 2012. And the ACNA was formed as a response partly to this issue in the Episcopal Church in 2009. Things went differently for the Methodists. In February 2019, the UMC held their vote on the same issue, and since their Book of Discipline had wording saying that homosexuality was incompatible with Christian teaching, the question was whether to take that out or leave it in. In the case of the UMC, the international churches voted overwhelmingly to leave the wording in, leading to the plan to keep the wording, the traditional plan, passing by 53% to 47%, despite widespread opposition in U.S. churches. There's no question now that the UMC is planning to split over the matter. Some progressive churches are disconnecting already, joining the Liberation Methodist Connection, or like Asbury United Methodist Church in Georgia and Glide Memorial Church in San Francisco, leaving to become independent congregations. But for most churches, they're staying in, retaining voting power until things can be settled at a general conference. And that would have happened already. May 2020 was going to be the showdown, the division of the UMC, but due to COVID-19, the general conference was canceled and pushed to August 2021. Now it's been canceled again, pushed to August 2022. A church very divided looks to be unwillingly held together for 2 whole years at least, due to issues beyond their control. But now, some of the traditionalist side are making a move. An organization that has wielded a significant amount of sway in the discussion, not without controversy, is the Wesleyan Covenant Association, or WCA. Their statement of moral principles says that marriage is between a man and a woman, and they represent over 1,500 associated churches. Even back in 2018, before the vote on the Book of Discipline wording, the WCA, not knowing which direction the UMC vote would be, had been preparing to lead the charge in a new Methodist movement. And now they are stepping out and preparing to launch a new Methodist denomination with the hope and intention that if things are organized properly, those on their side will officially make their transition into this denomination when the next General Conference does take place. If all the churches that voted to retain the wording in the Book of Discipline did join them, that would mean that this new denomination would end up being larger than the progressive denomination and the new largest Methodist denomination. It's called the Global Methodist Church, and based on their website, the plan is that the name and logo are not temporary, but the real name you'll be calling them by in the future. You may wonder why, if they seemingly won the battle, the Traditionalist United Methodists are the ones exiting. The answer lies in what happened following the 2019 vote. A group of leaders from all sides of the issue met together to create a protocol document called Reconciliation and Grace Through Separation and Restructuring. This document essentially rescinds the UMC Trust Clause, which made it difficult for churches to leave the UMC and keep their property. For a limited time, if churches decide to leave the UMC and form a new denomination, the protocol allows them to do so. Now, the Wesleyan Covenant Association and the 53%ers could stay and fight tooth and nail to keep the name United Methodist Church and keep the logo and push the others out, but the WCA decided that they liked the protocol and the idea of being the ones to leave. They stated on their website in an article titled Why the Wesleyan Covenant Association Supports the Protocol of Reconciliation and Grace Through Separation that their long goal had been to have the trust clause lifted, and also said, Traditionalist United Methodists have long argued that our denomination's institutional structure is overly bureaucratic, too costly, remote, and most importantly, not reflective of their core theological and ethical values. The protocol agreement allows traditionalists to begin building together a church that is far more flexible, less costly, and most importantly, one that promotes their core beliefs and ethical values. They also said that traditionalists leaving the UMC frees them from a dead-end debate, and that seeing the current controversy, the name United Methodist seems ill-fitting, and that it's difficult to see what actually unites United Methodists. So with the traditionalists likely to support the protocol, which also allows the progressives to keep the denomination and do with it as they please, it's probably as good as a done deal. The FAQ of the website for the protocol gives a look into the future of the United Methodist Church once the traditionalists are gone, saying, other legislation would create a more open, inclusive church by rescinding the traditional plan passed at GC 2019 and removing the harmful language and provisions regarding LGBTQ persons. That is a first step to creating a church where LGBTQ persons, their spouses, families, and friends are welcomed as siblings in Christ. If that's the future for the United Methodist Church, what's the future for the new Global Methodist Church? That's of course answered with some detail in the WCA's podcast episode announcing the Global Methodist Church and the new Global Methodist Church website, but here's a quick rundown of 8 things you need to know. Number 1, the Global Methodist Church doesn't exactly exist yet. The plan is for it to be legally formed when the protocol is adopted, and in fact, even if the protocol isn't adopted and support for it collapses, there are plans to immediately form the church anyway. Second, once this gets going, there will be a 12 to 24 month period for UMC churches to move into the new denomination, and then will follow a convening Global Methodist Church General Conference. We'll definitely be reporting on that when it happens here at Ready to Harvest, so subscribe to keep up to date. Third, like the UMC has, the Global Methodist Church has pledged to be ethically and racially diverse, and to have women serving in all levels of the church. Fourth, the Global Methodist Church says that it is almost certain that they will never adopt a trust clause, allowing all congregations in the new denomination to own their own property. And fifth, the Global Methodist Church will put term limits on bishops, something that the UMC General Conference voted on in 2012 and 2016, but which failed to pass both times. Sixth, there is a transitional book of doctrines and discipline to give a taste of what the Global Methodist Church will look like. A link to the whole thing is in the video description. The discipline says, we believe that human sexuality is a gift of God that is to be affirmed as it is exercised within the legal and spiritual covenant of a loving and monogamous marriage between one man and one woman, and that they affirm a scriptural view of sexuality and gender, but does avoid that exact controversial wording on homosexuality being incompatible with Christian teaching that remains in the UMC discipline. Seventh, there are some expectations that the protocol's allowance for new denominations forming, which doesn't put a limit on how many denominations may choose to do so long as they can get 100 congregations together, may lead to more than just the one traditionalist denomination being created. It could be there will be a moderate faction or an even more progressive faction that could come out of the deal too. And finally, once it's all said and done, and the new Global Methodist Church has had a conference or two, look at the Wesleyan holiness churches and other Methodist bodies that may look to join up. Some groups that were hesitant to consider merger into the mainline UMC may look more favorably on this new denomination that they may view as the bearers of the biblical standard in the fight. And if that happens, the Global Methodist Church may become the more united Methodist Church after all.